All right, to start on my studio project, my final draft of this name paper sculpture, I need to have settled on which kind of font style I'm going to use, some of those extra shapes. And you have this one sheet of this very thick poster board, and that needs to fit all the letters of your name, all your extra shapes. You can include as much more as you want with just that one sheet of paper. I would suggest starting lightly in pencil so that you can go back and erase. And some of this you may want to use a ruler for, nice straight lines. If you want to sketch first on a piece of drawing paper, 9x12 kind of lightweight drawing paper, you're welcome to kind of start there. And I'm just going to kind of go into my drawing because I'm confident. Came up with my own lettering style, a combination of one that I've seen, and I'm going to change a few things about it to make it original. And I'm just going to lightly kind of sketch on my paper all of my letters so I could go back and erase. So with that 11x14 paper, you need to be able to fit your entire name in there. I'd keep your letters about 3 to 4 inches tall. You may want to start by dividing your paper up. If I have 6 letters in my name, maybe I need to start by drawing 6 boxes on my paper. That's up to you. So light, I can erase anything. If I decide something is too big, I want to be able to fix that. I also am smushing my letters in pretty tight together. I don't need a lot of leftover space. I want there to be enough leftover room that I can draw my shapes that I'm putting with it. So not just my letters, but my shapes. And I also want to have enough room for a stand, a base for this work. And for redoing any letters, just keep that extra paper for all sorts of reasons. And now you're going to get a chance to move on to cutting. You could color first and then cut, but I would prefer cutting because then you know the actual shape you're trying to work on. The front and the back of this is going to need color in pattern and drawings. So if you move on to cutting next, then you know the exact shape you're trying to work on. I'm going to go ahead and start to cut and then go back later and add color. So I'm cutting on my pencil lines here, kind of cleaning up any rough edges, trying to cut straight lines for straight and curvy for curved. I can always modify my shapes a little bit. If I kind of change my mind as I'm cutting, it's okay if I go outside of my lines and make those changes. Maybe adding some details with my cut lines, creating a little bit more interest out of those shapes. And then I'll go back and erase any leftover pencil. Anywhere I didn't hit, I need to clean that up. And if I don't like a letter, if I don't like the way that it looked, I could use my extra paper to redo, recut, make a new one. To save some paper for a base, if you have any leftover paper from something else, you can use it. But to be able to start to stack and build these pieces up, save yourself a piece, and also save some scraps if you need to make some kind of joiners, if you need to be able to connect things together and have kind of a band-aid piece that's going to hold those two together. So save those scraps, maybe cut your base out before you get started, know how much you have left over for the rest of your shapes, or just use some spare drawing paper, collage paper, something else to keep for that. Once your shapes are cut, you can start to add color. You can use colored pencil, you could use marker, your flare pen, your Sharpie. You could even use watercolor on this. Be careful about using watercolor after pen. That flare pen will bleed if it gets wet, so be careful of that. I also tried something where I did not have a really great red-orange color, so I actually used the red of my marker and the orange of my colored pencil, and I layered them on top of each other. Sometimes if you layer marker on top of each other, the marker will like bleed and absorb the next color, like putting yellow over red is going to absorb that other color. So that's why I did a colored pencil on top of my marker so I wouldn't ruin any of my markers. I also really wanted a really bright neon yellowish green color, so I just used a highlighter for that section. So front and back is all going to be colored in, all of my shapes. My base only needs to be colored in one side. So I have finished working on my pieces. I have my base that only one side needs to be colored because it is going to sit down. I have my couple of extra pieces that I'm going to add on that go with my theme. And then I have all the letters of my name. Front and back, I've patterned, I have my color scheme, and I am ready to start to assemble. So I will need my scissors and my glue and some of scrap paper so I can make some little joiner pieces. And I want to think of about maybe 3 letters that I'm going to start and have be on the bottom as my beginning, my kind of base. You don't want to put any curves down here. You'd rather stick some of these flat sides and begin to build. Things can hang off the edge, and for joining those bottom pieces, it is possible that you fold the bottom of your paper, or you could create little pieces that I'm just going to cut some of this paper down and fold it in half. Just a little piece. I'm going to use some of my glue and glue a little bit onto the bottom kind of flat part of some of my letters that I'm going to start with on the bottom. And you may want to go back and color that either as you're working or at the end. You can go back with your colored pencils and markers and such to fill that in. Any of this extra glue, I'm just going to kind of scrape it off on a side piece of paper so it's not so thick. That'll take longer to glue. And then you can just decide, it could, like I said, hang off the edge and stick one of these pieces down. That little 90-degree fold will not hold that exactly vertically upright, but it's going to be pretty close as you're going to be adding on. Now to build from there, you're going to probably want to create these cuts. So you can see I have some already cut into here, and you could just put cuts kind of all over different angles that you kind of get to work with. And I'm just going to put one cut in, maybe a little less than 1/2 of an inch, and another cut just next to it, very close together, side by side. When I pull or cut that paper out, you're creating this little slot right here. And then you could begin to build one up onto the next one. Now this one has a cut here, but I don't have the side-by-side cut, so I'm gonna go back and add in a second cut. And then I can work on adding in a new piece. Now if you make several cuts, then you could always, your bottom pieces could just kind of stay permanently, and then you can kind of rework how your new pieces are going up and on top. So I'm going to put about 3 pieces down and keep kind of building up from there. So I'm going to keep making tabs, cutting that paper down, folding it in half at like a 90-degree angle, and gluing the flatter parts of some of my letters to my base. I can let these letters prop up and against each other to help support. I may need to add more kind of joiner pieces and just kind of play, explore, experiment. So I have a bit of a base being formed, and I could keep kind of working off the bottom here, or I can begin to kind of stack up. Sometimes you're going to want to rest letters against each other, kind of use the people around them, the shapes around them, to kind of build these together. Now if I want some things to interlock, I may need to add some more cuts so that the pieces can be held together. Your slotted sculpture can be a combination of cuts, but you can also use glue. If you want something to stay permanently, go ahead, add a little dab of glue and let that really lock into place. You're going to use a combination of building methods to get this thing to want to stay a little bit more permanent, and so it's not so breakable. I don't need to make the tallest sculpture out of these. You want to get at least 2, maybe even 3 letters high at some areas, and really play with 3-dimensional space. You're making this 3-dimensional form, and you want to let these shapes kind of come out and be unique from all the different angles. You'd want to be able to spin this around and see different viewpoints of this piece. Be careful about sticking too similar of things next to each other. I don't want my black and white patterns right next to my black and white patterns. I need to pay attention to which side of my letters I'm working with to make sure it is interesting, again, from all viewpoints.